Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Hello, this is MotorWeek's 36th podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm obviously not John Davis. We are flying without our commander once again. Our host, John Davis, is on the road this week, but we've got our usual automotive gurus with us here. Writer Shamit Choksey.
Hey.
Ben Davis, who works with me and does the majority of the actual work in the road test department.
Hello.
Over the Edge reporter and all-around good guy, Steven Chupnick.
Hello.
And I'm road test producer Brian Robinson. This week we've got something special, a little different than what we usually do here. We'll be joined by Kelsey Mays from Cars.com and Jim Healey from USA Today to discuss a comparison test that we did with those guys recently. And we'll have our usual lightning round question of the week and, of course, some listener email. But first up today, recently we did a comparison for our show and in conjunction with Cars.com and USA Today for a $25,000 family car shootout. And briefly, it was put out to all manufacturers to send a family sedan for less than $25,000. Some manufacturers participated and some chose not to. But we ended up with 8 mid and full-size sedans and came up with a winner. Now, before we get into the full details, let's bring in our guest, Jim Healey, no stranger to anyone who reads the USA Today or follows the car industry at all. I know I've been reading your articles in the USA Today for quite a while now. Jim, welcome.
Thank you. A lot of time on your hands, I guess, huh?
There were two things that really stuck out to me about the comparison. One was the level of equipment these cars had for under $25,000. I thought was pretty impressive. And two, how the domestic brands continue to improve, yet somehow still fall short in these comparisons. So, what are your thoughts?
It did seem strange. I guess I'd have to say I wouldn't necessarily have rated them the way that the judges did, but it was a very telling comparison, and having the families vote in there and having it count for 40% of the total kind of leavened things, I guess.
Yeah, and you mentioned the families. Yeah, one thing different about this comparison is we did bring in a local family, and that was arranged by Cars.com. And Kelsey, why don't you tell us a little bit about how that came about and maybe what their opinions were on the cars?
Well, the family, Ben and Jill Tiernan of West Los Angeles, they came in and actually their leases on their cars are coming up soon, so they came in and really provided a good family perspective. Ben's into cars, and they have 2 kids, and they poked around and really gave us a good perspective. Sometimes I think as a car reviewer you get into this bubble of things you like and things you don't like, and it's important to really stay connected to the market, and kind of the best way to do that is actually to have a real family on site to tell you what their needs are and to have them help you out when checking out the cars.
Yeah, a lot of times I think we on the media all focus on the same things, and maybe it's not what the general consumer is looking for.
Right.
But before I get too far, I guess I should run down the cars that we did have in their place. We had 8 cars, as I mentioned, and coming in last was the Ford Fusion, which was kind of surprising since that was just Motor Trend Car of the Year last year. 7th place was Chevrolet Malibu, again, the 2 domestics kind of bringing up the rear. 6th place, Nissan Altima, Honda Accord, 5th. Our top 4 was the Mazda 6. 3rd place, Suzuki Kizashi, a new car in this segment. Toyota Camry came in 2nd, and our winner, of course, the 2011 Hyundai Sonata. Now, as usually the case with these comparisons, the most recent redesign seems to come out the winner, and the older designs kind of fall to the bottom. Jim, I don't know if you remember or not, but we did an interview with you like halfway through the comparison, and you said, at least on paper, it looked like the Sonata would be the one to beat, and that ended up coming true. What was it about the Sonata you think that put it to the top?
Well, I'm just a genius, obviously, but it seems like every succeeding generation of a car has a chance to put in more features for less money because things have gotten popular, the cost per unit is down, and that's what it was like with the Hyundai. It had a lot of premium level features, navigation, as I recall, direct injection, 4-cylinder engine, which is just on the front end of that technology. So it has a lot of things to recommend it, and the others that haven't been redesigned in the past couple years were behind a little bit.
Yeah, and Kelsey, was the Sonata your winner for you? I know we mentioned the family kind of had a little bit more of an input in our final results. Was the Sonata your winner as well, or did you have something else?
It was. I think that people want to buy the car that looks the best, and hopefully the hardware underneath holds up, and the Sonata really did. Jim mentioned the engine is really a pretty good engine. Good fuel economy, 35 miles per gallon in EPA ratings for that car with the 4-cylinder, and it's got some pretty good get up and go too. I mean, you look at that and you compare it to some of these cars that are kind of aging down the pipeline. And you look at cars like the Chevy Malibu, which has an engine that's a few years back, and it feels some of these cars feel more encumbered by their weight, certainly, than the Sonata did.
Let's turn to our guys here in the studio, Shamit, Ben, Steven.
The Sonata, I'm not 100% surprised about this because of what Hyundai's been doing in recent years. And they've been putting out a lot of, it just seems like year over year now, things are getting better and better from Korea. For me, the big surprise, and I should also say it's a little bit of a disappointment to see Ford and Chevy come up behind, just because of what's happened in the last year and a half. It would have been nice to see them fall somewhere in the middle, but Suzuki Kizashi is a real. That's a surprise to me. I mean, he's just this one's coming out of nowhere. I would say a lot of people just don't even know what this thing is. It kind of really makes the whole terrain a little bit more textured and interesting, because here's this guy coming from nowhere and he's placing third. It's kind of amazing.
Well, I know on the Kizashi, we have a long-term Kizashi here, and I took it on long trips, and the first thing that surprised me was just, one, how comfortable it is just to drive for that long distance, but then you get down to the driving factor and the gas mileage that I got, and I'll preface this with, I'm a very conservative driver, and I was able to get an extremely high number in the gas and the mileage per gallon that I was just shocked.
Yeah, I should mention all the cars in the Shootout were all 4 cylinders, and they all had automatic transmissions. Car-wise, two things that stood out to me were, one was the Camry. It's never the most exciting car, but when you put it in a comparison like this, it's hard to deny its livability and comfort. And also the Mazda 6, I didn't realize I liked it as much as I did until I kind of put it up with everything else. Jim, what surprised you most about the comparison?
Well, the Kizashi surprised me in the sense that, well, I like it a lot, and it might have been my personal number one. Ben, the father of the family, said about the same thing. He only chose not to choose it because he didn't think his wife would like it that much. But it's a little edgy for most people. In my mind, not really a mainstream family car, but he certainly thought so. And he's coming out of an Audi, and she's coming out of a Mercedes, so they have some car sense, obviously, at least as far as the driving feel of things go. The other two things that surprised me, and here again I would have did differ from the consensus, and that is I thought the Camry, while nicely turned out, was pretty much terrible once in motion. I thought it had the worst driving and riding dynamics of anything in the test. And I was quite surprised about the Accord, which on the inside struck me as really, really down market and noisy, and I thought maybe we had a low-end one to match or to meet the price, and I looked at it later, and it was an EX, which is the high-end one. So those were the two big surprises to me.
Yeah, I have to agree with the Accord. That's kind of always been my benchmark in this class, and I was kind of disappointed with that one myself.
The interesting thing about the Accord, as Jim was saying, we did get the EX, and the ones that we've been driving here back in our offices are more EXLs and more with the V6 engines and stuff like that. And when you get down to these sort of lower-end Accords that aren't fully loaded, the car does become a lot less impressive, even relatively speaking.
Yeah, that said, it did drive nicely. The steering and the handling were good, but I just found it noisy and not at all a premium feel.
And the Ford Fusion, what is it about it that Motor Trend likes so much that we obviously didn't? Anybody?
Well, I think I liked it again. I must be the odd man out here, but I liked it, I think, more than most of the other people who gave it a score. It came in last in the consensus judging. I wouldn't have put it down that far. I would have, for example, put it ahead of the Accord and the Camry. It seemed to me a very good all-around package, and I had forgotten that I liked the handling so much. It seemed very responsive without being twitchy or harsh that you sometimes get as a trade-off.
I can see what you're saying, Jim. I think what happened with the Fusion is that the particular car we were driving had a lot of transmission hesitation, and that certainly proved to be a deal breaker for the family when they were out driving with senior editor Dave Thomas, and we noticed it too. And so that got to be kind of the thorn in its side.
Yeah, it's kind of almost a raw deal. I wish that wasn't the case, because I think Fusion might have placed at maybe even higher than the Altima and more sort of in the middle of the pack, just from an overall standpoint.
Definitely,
yeah, certainly possible.
From a design standpoint, for sure.
Kelsey, you're the one pretty much that put most of this together, and I think everything went really well. Kind of give us the background on how this came about and why you guys wanted to do this.
Well, it was interesting. Obviously, being in the Midwest, we don't get a lot of good weather in the winter to really put cars through an honest test, and so we thought, well, we should go out to where the weather's nicer and wrangle a bunch of cars really at the heart of the market. And interestingly, we were all talking about this. When you drive cars over the same route, and you get in the next car and you drive it over the same route, and you get in the next car and you drive it over the same route, this sort of malaise you get looking at a crowd of cars and thinking, wow, they really all look the same and might feel the same. That goes away, because the real differences in the cars really become apparent. And so as we continue to say to our readers, if you're test driving on a weekend, make sure it's going to be a long Saturday, but make sure you drive them all back to back if you can, because then the real differences between the cars will emerge.
Yeah, that was kind of my experience with the Kizashi. I had driven one here before we went out there, and I was really impressed with it. But then kind of when you get it compared to all the others, you realize how small it is, and maybe it's not as refined as some of the others. Did
you guys get any sort of indication whether the family had even heard of a Kizashi, Suzuki Kizashi? Were they?
Well, that's the interesting part, because I asked Ben when he was driving. I said, "Does the fact that it's a Suzuki matter to you?" I figured he'd answer that it took away a little bit because it didn't have the image, the prestige, and so forth. But he said that was a plus, because it was a clean slate. His neighbors wouldn't know how to regard it. They just assume it must be cool because here's a guy moving from an Audi to a Suzuki.
Right.
And it's got a good rep for motorcycles. And so to him it was a plus that it was a kind of an unknown factor.
Well, I think with the Kizashi, speaking of size, and one comparison that Kelsey, you guys did was the trunk space. And the Kizashi obviously has the smallest, but I thought that was a good comparo to say it's not just driving factor, it's the size of everything. And, when you guys looked it over, what was the main factor of trying to figure out that trunk space?
Well, the trunk space was trying to see how well you can fit everything in, and it goes back to not just the absolute size of the trunk, but the contours of the trunk. I mean, where the wheel wells are, how well the floor is flatly arrayed or not. And that'll pay dividends or take away from how much stuff you can really stuff in there as a family car buyer when you go on that weekend run to Costco or what have you. The Kizashi's trunk is small, but what really stuck out in the size of the car was the back seat, particularly if you're putting in child seats, just certainly not as big as the back seats in the Accord, the Camry, a few of the others. So
yeah, I mean that's an amen from me. I tried to get in the back seat from one side to the other, and it was very difficult. There was a lot of throwing of the feet up and around and climbing over things just to move from one side of the back seat to the other. So in that sense, I think it might be wanting as a family car.
Yeah, I mean, Suzuki seems to have done a very good job making use of the space that there is. I mean, the front seats are sculpted in a way that backseat passengers can really put their knees into them without feeling too uncomfortable, and the seats sit nice and high. But at the same time, as you were alluding to, Jim, I mean, you can only sculpt so much space out of a smaller wrapper.
The Kizashi was obviously one of the more entertaining cars to drive, one of the most fun to drive cars. And the Sonata, depending on the review, I've seen it both ways. Some people say it handles really great, and I think other people have said it hasn't. How would you compare those two handling-wise, Jim?
In my mind, Kizashi would win that one pretty easily.
How about you, Kelsey?
Well, interestingly, the Sonata we had was a GLS model, and there's a sport-tuned Sonata SE, and so that might account for some of the variations in the reviews. But the Kizashi is a pretty nimble car. Its suspension is obviously a more sporting type, and it's a smaller car, and so almost by dint of that, it just has tighter steering feel, less body roll, that sort of stuff. So
this question goes out to either Kelsey or Brian. Just out of curiosity, if you had a Frankenstein table and could pull all the characteristics out of the entire test field and put them all together into one car that would suit you the most, what characteristics would you take from what to end up with your ideal car?
I'll let you take that first, Kelsey, so I can think about it for a while.
Sorry about that one.
I would certainly take the styling of the Sonata with the driving characteristics of the Kizashi, and to Jim's point, I mean, the Camry doesn't have a very controlled ride, but boy, is it comfortable. I mean, you get into some of these big cars and you say it rides like a boat, but at the same time, you don't feel many bumps, and that's kind of the case with the Camry. So I would take the styling of the Sonata, the handling of the Kizashi, and the ride comfort, if not the quality, of the Camry.
I think I would go with the front-end styling of the Sonata, the rear-end styling of the Fusion, the interior of the Camry with the options of the Mazda 6. How about that?
And the wheels of the Kizashi?
All right, well, I think time is flying by here, so I guess we'd better move on. I'd like to thank Jim and Kelsey for joining us, and be sure to check out their takes on this comparison at both cars.com and usatoday.com. Thanks, Jim.
Well, thank you for having us on, Brian.
Thanks, Kelsey. We'll talk to you later.
All right, take care.
You can also get a full rundown on all the cars that were in the comparison, as well as a breakdown of all the scoring on the cars.com website. All right, lightning round time. I'll throw out a question to our experts here, and we'll pontificate and elaborate. And
experts? What experts?
hopefully educate you on our vast knowledge of the automotive history.
I don't pontificate after lunch, but I'll try.
All right, here we go. Honda's president, Takanobu Ito, recently called the company complacent after its market share dropped while Hyundai is on fire. What can other automakers learn from this? Boy, that's not an easy one. Who wants to chime in?
I mean, I'll start. Like we talked about, just with the shootout, Hyundai won the shootout over the Honda Accord, Toyota Camry. Hyundai is coming up. Excuse me, Hyundai is coming up in this world, and I think I think some of these Hondas and Toyotas who over the past 10 years have just sold cars based on reputation alone. I think that's, I think you look at Hyundai, they're coming up, and they're really putting out good product. I think some of these people need to go back and look at what they did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and start making the better product and for a cheaper price.
Yeah, I mean, if Hyundai's president is saying that about his company, I wonder what Toyota's president is saying right now.
Well, I think what he was referring to was that actually the Toyota, more of their marketing efforts on why they're not capitalizing on this all of Toyota's problems. Toyota sales are way down. Theirs are barely up. And he kind of thinks they should be getting all that business. But I think that's what he was referring to. He did call out the Prius and the Insight specifically, in that Prius gets better mileage than the Insight, and he's not happy about that. And Prius also outsells the Insight 5-1, which he's not happy about. But I think the Toyota's problems have become maybe the whole Japanese industry's problems, because they used to have this stigma as being the safest and most reliable cars, and all of a sudden now they're not. And some of that sales have come back to the U.S. brands, but I think most of it's going to the Korean brands.
You would have thought Honda would have reaped off of this, and you're right. They haven't at all.
Right. Well, you got to give it to Hyundai, too, because it's unfortunate that a situation like this arose for Toyota and Honda, but you got to give it to Hyundai for being there and having what it takes to take over some of that market when it's available. I mean,
Oh, hey, well, I guess we haven't actually answered the question, which is what can other automakers learn from this? So maybe we'll have some overtime to answer that. I'm not sure, but I think
when you get to the top, don't rest. You got to keep pushing and striving.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a matter of the 800-pound gorilla is just taking everything for granted for a long time. And Hyundai's this whole build has taken years. This is not a overnight thing, but Hyundai's positioned and poised perfectly when this type of situation arose, and they struck with irons hot. I mean,
absolutely.
And it's all about marketing. I mean, as being a car guy, you want to say it's all about product, and in a way it is. But if you make a better product, but no one knows about it,
totally.
Yeah, you got to get the word out there.
Yeah, and vice versa.
All right. Over to you. Did we get it answered or no? Not sure. Oh, okay.
We did our best.
Yeah.
Okay. Our email question this week comes from Rita. And if you have a question or comment for us, go to motorweek.org and let us have it. If we do pick your question, you'll get a MotorWeek T-shirt, which is a lovely heather gray, by the way, and it's got our logo on it. And it's the perfect summer attire. If you ask
Is that
me.
short sleeve or long sleeve? Oh, it is short
Both.
sleeve. Oh,
well,
really?
I guess the freebie would probably be short.
Short sleeve. Okay.
Unless it's a really good question, and then maybe you can get along.
All right, well, let's see what happens with this question then.
And actually, I think they're for sale on our website, too, if you don't get an email answer.
Excellent. I'll check that out since we don't get any freebies around here.
Yeah, okay. So, Rita asks, I'm wondering about the recommendation to service the transmission every 30,000 miles. My husband thinks this is excessive and asked me to find out from you if this is a good interval or if we can wait longer in between servicings. Go ahead, anybody?
I think this is totally a Brian Robinson question.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, you're really good on maintenance. I mean, you kind of keep your eye on our fleet over here, so I always defer these kinds of questions back to you.
I don't know the brand of car. She doesn't mention that, so it's hard to say. But whatever the owner's manual says is what I tend to stick with. Not the dealer recommendations, because obviously they want to get you in the dealership more than you necessarily need to be there. 30,000 miles. It doesn't sound like a lot of miles, but that's probably 2 years. I don't think that's asking too much to get your transmission checked out.
Certainly not. It's an easy thing to do, too. It's a drain and fill kind of deal. And sometimes you have to replace a filter in automatic transmissions, but believe me, you don't want to go 60, 70, 80, 100,000 miles before you address that transmission, because it could be way too late at that point and very expensive.
All right. Anybody else? No? All right.
You know what? Let me ask you just a variant on that question.
Yeah.
If you're putting very few miles on a car, maybe several thousand, 7,000, 8,000, would you at some point, override the miles to the amount of time?
Yeah. If your transmission fluid in question was 6 years old and you still don't have 30,000 on the clock, you're saying? Absolutely.
I think you have to, because I think less mileage is worse than a lot of mileage, just because it doesn't get used. I know my car sits more than it drives.
It certainly does.
Every time I get in, something else is now wrong with it because it's been sitting there for a month. So maybe I should have someone else answer this question next time, not me.
Age with everything.
All right, I guess we're out of time for this week. I'd like to thank Jim Healey of USA Today and Kelsey Mays from Cars.com for joining us, our producer Michelle Parker, podcast creator Bob Mixter, and of course our audio engineer Jim Bigwood. Be sure to check us out each week on PBS and check out our website, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube channel, etc., etc. And we'll see you next time here on MotorWeek.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.